I sat alone in my kitchen at 9:47 p.m., staring at a phone that never rang. No text from my mother, no call from my sister, not even a generic happy birthday post from my brother, who remembered everyone else's birthday down to the hour. I had turned 38 that day, and I had spent it exactly the way I spent the last 9, waiting for a family that had quietly decided I didn't matter enough to remember. I blew out the single candle I'd stuck into a slice of grocery store cake alone in the dark and made a decision that would change everything. I was done being invisible. My name is Diane Reyes. I'm a project manager at a mid-sized logistics company in Sacramento, California. I'm good at my job, methodical, detail-oriented, the kind of person who notices when a shipment is off by 0.5% before anyone else does. Turns out, that same instinct for noticing small inconsistencies was about to unravel something much bigger than a birthday. For 10 years, my family had celebrated my sister Karen's birthday with parties, banners, and group texts that started 3 weeks in advance. Karen's birthday was April 14th, mine was April 21st, 7 days apart. Every single year, the celebration for her stretched so long it swallowed mine whole. My mother, Linda, always had an excuse. We were still recovering from Karen's party, sweetheart. Things have been so hectic. I didn't realize it had already passed. 10 years of, I didn't realize. I used to correct myself when I felt bitter about it. I told myself family isn't about performative gestures. I told myself real love doesn't need candles and cards. But somewhere around year 7, I stopped believing my own excuses. Because it wasn't just my birthday. It was everything. My promotion at work mentioned for 4 seconds before the conversation turned back to Karen's new house. My divorce 2 years ago, met with a 2-line text from my mother. These things happen. Are you coming to Karen's anniversary dinner? I had become a background character in my own family's story. That night, after blowing out my sad little candle, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the family group chat and scrolled all the way back. All the way back to messages from 2016. I wanted to see it in writing. I wanted proof that this wasn't in my head. What I found stopped my breath. There, in a message from my mother to my sister, dated April 20th, 2019, 1 day before my birthday, was a message that hadn't been sent to me. It was a group chat, but somehow I had been removed from it and quietly re-added days later. I only found this because Karen, in her carelessness, had exported an old backup of the chat to a shared family cloud drive for a completely unrelated reason. She wanted an old photo from a vacation. The message from my mother read, "Let's not make a big deal out of Diane's birthday this year. She'll understand. Let's focus on getting through your recovery first." Karen's recovery, I didn't even know what that meant. As far as I knew, my sister hadn't had surgery or been sick that April. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, feeling like the floor had shifted 3 inches to the left. I typed a message to my mother, then deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote, "What recovery was Karen having in April 2019? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "What are you talking about?" my mother finally replied. I sent her a screenshot of the message. The 3 dots vanished completely this time. No reply came for 6 hours. The next morning, my brother Tom called me. Tom was the family peacekeeper, always smoothing things over, always the one saying "let's not fight" before anyone had even raised their voice. His voice was careful, almost rehearsed. "Hey Di, Mom mentioned you found some old messages. Look, that was ages ago. I'm sure it's nothing." "Nothing," I repeated. She told Karen not to make a big deal of my birthday because Karen was recovering. Recovering from what, Tom? There was a pause just a beat too long. "I don't remember the specifics," he said. "You know, Mom, she probably just meant Karen was stressed." I hung up. Something in his voice, that careful, over-rehearsed tone, told me he remembered exactly what it meant, and that scared me more than anything. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the years my birthday had quietly disappeared, one after another, like pages torn out of a calendar. And I kept thinking about that word, recovering. 2 days later, I drove 40 minutes to my Aunt Pam's house. Pam was my father's sister, the one relative who had never fully assimilated into my mother's carefully managed family narrative. She'd always been on the outside, invited to holidays, but never trusted with real information. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be her, precisely because she had nothing left to lose by telling it. I showed her the screenshot. Pam read it twice, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Diane," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something before I tell you this. I've wanted to tell you for years. I just didn't think it was my place." My stomach dropped. "In April 2019, your mother and Karen took a trip," Pam said. "They told everyone it was a girls' weekend in Sedona. It wasn't. Karen had a procedure done, a cosmetic one, rhinoplasty and some liposuction. Your mother paid for it, all of it, about $14,000. I sat there, stunned, trying to process the sheer specificity of the number. $14,000, I repeated. "That's not all," Pam continued. "That same month, the month of your birthday, your mother took out a loan against the house your father left in a trust for both you and Karen when he passed. She used it to fund Karen's procedures and to help her with a down payment on her condo. You were supposed to inherit half of the equity in that house eventually. She never told you any of this." I felt like someone had reached into my chest and hollowed it out. My father had died 6 years earlier, when I was 32. He'd been careful, methodical like me, and he'd set up a trust specifically so that the house, the one asset that mattered most to him, would eventually be split evenly between my sister and me. He didn't trust my mother's spending habits. He told me once, quietly in his last year, "Diane, promise me you'll keep an eye on the trust paperwork. Your mother means well, but she doesn't always think long term." I had trusted the family lawyer to handle it. I had trusted my mother to be honest. I had been naive. "Why would she hide a birthday because of Karen's plastic surgery?" I asked Pam, my voice shaking. "Because," Pam said gently, "your birthday would have brought up questions. Questions about money, questions about the house. If everyone was celebrating you, someone might have asked why you seemed distant, or why you weren't at the property more, or why the trust hadn't been formally split yet. It was easier to keep you invisible than to keep explaining." I drove home in silence, the radio off, my hands gripping the wheel too tightly. 10 years of "we forgot." Things were hectic, we didn't realize. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was strategy. I had been quietly, deliberately erased from my own family's calendar because my presence was inconvenient to a lie about money. That night, I didn't cry. I made a list. The first thing I needed was documentation. If my mother had taken out a loan against a trust property, there would be paperwork, county records, bank statements, loan documents. Trusts in California are recorded, and depending on how my father structured it, my mother may not have even had the legal authority to encumber the property without my consent as a co-beneficiary. I called my father's old attorney, a soft-spoken man named Richard Okafor, who had handled the estate paperwork. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he remembered me immediately. "Diane, it's been a long time. What can I do for you?" I explained everything, the messages, Pam's revelation, the loan. Richard went quiet for a moment. "Let me pull the original trust documents," he said. "I want to check something before I say anything definitive." 3 days later he called me back, and his voice had changed. It was sharper now, more careful, the voice of a lawyer who had just found something significant. "Diane, your father's trust specified that the property could not be sold, refinanced, or encumbered without the written consent of both beneficiaries, you and Karen, once you both turned 25. You were 32 when this loan was taken out. If your mother took out a loan against that property without your signature, that's not just a family betrayal. That could be trust fraud." I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, feeling something shift inside me. It wasn't rage exactly. It was clarity. "I want copies of everything," I said. "The loan documents, the original trust, all of it." "I can request them," Richard said. But Diane, once we pull these records formally, there's no undoing it. Your mother will know you're looking. Are you prepared for what happens next? I thought about 10 birthdays. 10 years of small, cutting erasures dressed up as forgetfulness. 10 years of being told implicitly that I mattered less. I'm prepared, I said. The records took 3 weeks to arrive. When they did, they told a story more complete and more damning than I expected. My mother had indeed taken out a home equity loan in April 2019, using the trust property as collateral, without my signature. She had forged what appeared to be my consent, a signature that, when I compared it to my actual signature on my apartment lease from that same year, didn't match at all, not even close. The letters slanted wrong. My real signature has a distinctive loop on the D that this forged one didn't have. I brought the documents to a forensic document examiner, a woman named Sylvia Chen, who worked with several local law firms. She confirmed within a week what I already suspected. This signature was not written by the same hand as your other samples, she told me, laying the documents side by side. The pressure points are different. The stroke direction on the capital D is inconsistent with every other sample you've provided me. I'd testify to that in court. I sat in her office holding the printed comparison, my hands steady now in a way they hadn't been in weeks. This wasn't just proof of a lie anymore. This was proof of a crime. I called Karen first, not my mother. Karen. I know about the surgery, I said. I know about the loan. I know Mom forged my signature on the trust documents. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Karen said something I didn't expect. I told her this would come out eventually, Karen said, her voice small. Diane, I didn't know she forged your signature. I swear to you, I didn't know that part. I knew about the money. I knew we weren't supposed to make a big deal about your birthday that year because Mom said you'd start asking questions if things felt too normal. But the forgery I didn't know. You let it happen for 10 years, I said. You let Mom erase my birthday every single year so nobody would ask the wrong questions. I know, Karen whispered. I'm sorry. I really am. I believed her in a strange way. Karen had always been the favored child, but favored children rarely question the hand that feeds them. She had been complicit, but I didn't think she'd been the architect. My mother was a different conversation entirely. I called her on a Tuesday evening. I recorded the call legally, since California requires two-party consent for recorded calls. I informed her at the start that I was recording, which she agreed to without realizing what that meant for what came next. Mom, I need to ask you about the loan you took out on Dad's house in April 2019. Diane, why are you digging up old things? This is exactly why I didn't want to make a fuss about your birthday that year. You always turn everything into an interrogation. You forged my signature, I said quietly. The silence on the other end lasted almost 10 full seconds. I was going to pay it back, she finally said. I always intended to pay it back before you or Karen needed the equity. It was never meant to hurt you. You erased me from my own birthday for 10 years, so I wouldn't ask questions about money you stole from a trust Dad set up specifically because he didn't trust you with it, I said. You forged legal documents. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's fraud. Don't you dare use that word with me, she snapped, her voice rising. I raised you. I gave you everything. You gave me silence, I said. Every April, for 10 years, you gave me silence, and now I know why. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. From something closer to relief. The next step was harder than any conversation. I had to decide what kind of justice I actually wanted. Sending my mother to prison for forgery felt like it would only fracture what remained of my family beyond repair, and worse, it wouldn't get me what I actually needed, my rightful share of my father's trust. Richard, the attorney, laid out my options clearly. You can pursue criminal charges for forgery and trust fraud, which is a real possibility given the evidence, he said. Or you can pursue a civil claim to unwind the encumbrance on the property, recover your share of the equity, and require your mother to formally repay the loan from her own assets, not the trust. Given the strength of Sylvia's forensic analysis, You have leverage either way. I chose the second path, not out of mercy, but out of strategy. Criminal charges could be dismissed, delayed, tied up in a system that often protects people who look sympathetic in front of a jury, especially aging mothers. But a civil claim, backed by forensic evidence of forgery, was airtight. It would force her to either settle immediately or risk a public court battle where every ugly detail, the forged signature, the concealed loan, the years of engineered invisibility, would become part of the permanent record. Richard filed the civil suit in July. My mother's attorney reached out within 11 days, requesting a settlement conference. She didn't want this going to trial. She didn't want a judge reading aloud in open court the details of how she'd forged her own daughter's signature to hide a home equity loan used to fund her favorite child's cosmetic surgery. The settlement conference took place in a bland, fluorescent-lit conference room in downtown Sacramento. My mother sat across from me, older than I remembered, her hands folded tightly on the table. She didn't look at me for the first 20 minutes. Her attorney proposed a settlement, full repayment of the loan amount, plus interest, funded through the sale of a rental property she'd owned separately, along with formal transfer of my equal share in my father's house, retroactively adjusted to account for the years the loan had accrued interest at my expense. I agreed to the terms. Richard had advised me that this was, realistically, more than a court might have awarded me after a lengthy trial, and it came without years of litigation dragging my life apart. Before we signed, my mother finally looked at me. "I didn't think you'd ever find out," she said quietly. It wasn't an apology. It was closer to an admission that her strategy had simply failed. "That's exactly the problem, Mom," I said. "You built an entire decade around the hope that I never would." She had nothing to say to that. The settlement was finalized in September. I received my full share of the property equity, backdated with interest, deposited directly into an account under my name only. For the first time in 10 years, something with my name on it had actually been protected instead of quietly stripped away. But the money was never really the point. The point was smaller and somehow larger than money. It was the birthday. The following April, on my 39th birthday, I woke up and did something I hadn't done in a decade. I didn't wait by my phone. I didn't wonder if anyone would remember. I took the day off work, drove 2 hours to the coast, and sat on a quiet beach in Half Moon Bay by myself, watching the tide come in. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Karen. "Happy birthday, Diane," the text read. I know it doesn't undo anything, but I remembered, and I'm not going to forget again. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply right away. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you owe on anyone else's timeline. But I did eventually write back, "Thank you, that means something." My mother never reached out that day, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. Some people don't change because they've been caught. They change only if they're willing to actually look at what they did. And my mother, even after everything, still framed the entire ordeal as me making a fuss rather than as her having erased me on purpose. I let that go too, not because it didn't matter, but because carrying her refusal to change would have cost me more peace than it was worth. I still talk to Karen. Slowly, carefully, we're rebuilding something that might eventually resemble a real relationship, one built on honesty instead of convenient silence. I talk to my mother occasionally at holidays, in careful surface-level conversations. We are not close. I'm not sure we ever will be again, and I've made peace with that too. Every April now, I celebrate my birthday exactly the way I want to. Sometimes that's a quiet day alone at the beach. Last year, it was a small dinner with 3 close friends who have never once forgotten a date that mattered to me. This year, it might be something else entirely. The difference is that now, I decide, nobody gets to quietly erase me from my own life anymore. Not for convenience, not to protect a lie, not for any reason at all. 10 years of silence taught me something my family never intended to teach me. That the people who are supposed to remember you the most are sometimes the ones most invested in you staying invisible. And that the most powerful thing you can do when you finally notice the pattern isn't rage or revenge for its own sake. It's simply refusing to disappear anymore. I blew out my candle this year with the porch door open, the ocean air drifting in, nobody watching, nobody needing to remember for me, because for the first time in a decade, I remembered myself. And that, it turns out, was always enough.